Hi there, Sean Oscar here. Thanks for joining me today. The podcast guest I've got on today is Monica Smit, but I've also got her father, John Smit, on the podcast. And the reason I wanted the pair of them here today is because I wanted to talk to them and understand the father-daughter dynamic that they have. Monica showed during the COVID lockdowns that she was a tough girl. She was arrested 3 times and then she wouldn't sign bail conditions and they basically locked her up for 22 days. And she stood her ground through all that, which I thought was incredible. Incredibly brave and determined, you know? So having a daughter like that, I wanted to talk to her father and find out what life was like being the father of such a big personality and such a strong-headed, strong-willed young woman. So I hope you guys enjoy this podcast. I think it was a fascinating look into who these people are. Obviously, you can watch the news and see all the headlines, but I wanted to get to know them on a personal level and find out what the journey was like for them both. So enjoy the conversation. Obviously, comment and subscribe, like the video, and we'll see you next time. Let's start at just before COVID, because I think that's kind of where this transition to, I guess, the person you are today really started. So what were you doing just prior to COVID and that transition to becoming the Monica Smit that we know now?
And just firstly, Dad, he just called you by your name.
Isn't that good?
John, because on tour he's known as Monica's dad.
Oh, right.
No one actually knows his name.
John
so you've
Smit,
done a really good job there.
Well, we're in front already.
Yeah. Anyway, so just before COVID, 3 years prior to that, I know it sounds like I'm going back a long way, but I can summarize it very quickly, is I was in real estate. I did quite well. I had some money in the bank and I had a decision. I could invest it and have a very good career, which is fine, or I could spend that money traveling the world and see what happens, and I chose the second option. And really that's when I started to evolve as a human being, because Australia is a pretty lucky country. I was brought up with all the love and attention and warmth and clothing that I needed. So I didn't really know what the rest of the world was like. So when I started traveling in third world countries, I started to see what the world was really like. And that was when I was exposed to the evils of the world as well.
Sure.
Because for some reason I started interviewing people. And when you start asking questions, you start to learn. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't talking, because I talk a lot. When I was younger, I used to get paid to shut up. So for the first time in my life, I was asking questions and listening to the answers. And that's when I learned about the sex trade in Thailand and the opioid crisis in America. And I just traveled asking questions. Yeah. And one day, just to tie it all together, I was looking for purpose, Sean, because I don't have kids. I was 30 years old. I still don't have kids. And I think I still have time, obviously. But I said to God, I made a deal with God. I said, look, if marriage and children isn't your mission for me, although that's what I want, if that's not your purpose for me, you're going to have to give me something else, because otherwise what's the point in living if you don't have children and you don't have a purpose? So I made a deal with God and I said, I'll keep asking questions, I'll keep traveling, I'll keep trying to evolve. And all I ask you in return is to make it very clear to me what my purpose is. And when you make it clear to me, I promise I will work my butt off to do whatever you want me to do. And obviously I prayed too hard and I got everything that I asked for. So here we are. Be careful
what you wish for, as they say. So when you were interviewing people, was that for a podcast or was that for just your personal enlightenment?
I had no idea where it would go or what I would do with it. And I have made little videos for orphanages to help them raise money. And I did do other little documentaries along the way. But a lot of that content is just sitting on flash drives and I don't know when I'll ever do something with it.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. And what about you, John? What was it like raising Monica? Was she always like this? Was there a fire in her? Was there a uniqueness to her? I mean, you've got 5 kids, did you say? Or?
And I'm the youngest.
Yeah.
Well, she's the youngest of 5 children. And right from the start, we noticed that she was quite talkative and always asking questions and always interrupting, always, debating with us, some sort of debating when we asked her to do something, she would come back with something, well, maybe I can do it later. Or Daniel should do that. I don't want to do that. It was always that sort of an atmosphere.
Headstrong.
quite headstrong, but also obedient, when it came to, the parents are in charge of the children and we have to make sure we do the right things for them. But especially at school, even at primary school, the teachers would come up to my wife and me and say, she talks too much. She asks too many questions.
Yeah.
So we thought that was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, sure.
So that sort of atmosphere that she was brought up in, sitting around the dining room table, we always ate together. There was always a few subjects going around the table, and we'd all give the children a chance to discuss what their feeling was on that. And certainly Monica, even at the age of 5, she would put her 5 cents worth in.
Sure.
So we had this sort of openness in our family that we let everybody talk. We prayed together every night. We didn't have TV, which I think, thinking back, did that make a difference? I think it probably did, but it wasn't something we planned. It wasn't something my wife and I said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's just something that just developed. We just felt that the stuff that was on television just wasn't appropriate or wasn't necessary to hear the news every night,
Sure.
So this is the sort of atmosphere that we brought our children up in.
With the religious side and the spiritual side, I guess, how much has that shaped, I guess, just putting Monica aside for a minute, like raising a family in that environment, what were the sort of differences that you notice with your family that you say, I guess, have been positive out of that?
Well, that's a really, really good question. Whenever we made a decision on something, we would always pray about it. We would do a novena or we'd say a special rosary for that particular intention, and we just let God guide us in that atmosphere. And that's how we are guided by God. This is a very positive thing within our family. So when a crisis happened or something happened, we'd pray about it and we'd say, okay, whatever happens, happens. And sometimes it wasn't very good. Sometimes it wasn't what we wanted, but we just accepted it.
Sure.
And we moved on.
And I guess it's probably where you draw a lot of strength from as well then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So going back to you, Monica, then you've come back from that trip. You're back in Australia now. What were you doing? And then, I guess I want to find this exact point where you sort of found this purpose to become, I guess, a civil activist, if you like, or someone who was actually going to be taking the reins to say, I'm going to make a difference to what's happening in this world. Was that just before COVID, or was it because of COVID, or?
Well, COVID kind of started around, I guess you could say, March-ish. And I was already doing a project at that time about the Brumbies, for example. So even when I came back into Australia, I started doing journalism and activism straight away to try to save the Brumbies up in the high country of Victoria, because the government wanted to fly over with helicopters and shoot these horses,
sure.
Which, by the way, is not very accurate, and they end up dying slowly. And they said that the horses were ruining the flora and things like that, but it was actually the pigs and other animals doing it. So there was a whole group of people that were very passionate about that. So I worked on that. I started to meet some members of parliament through that project on its own. And then I met Morgan, who was my boyfriend during COVID, and he was already an activist against Daniel Andrews. He was really passionate about the anti-China, Daniel Andrews doing deals with China basically behind our backs. And so I was quite inspired by his work. And then, I'll tell you the moment. There is a moment. Morgan had an event planned from about April or March in 2020. And he kept delaying it because of lockdowns, because we didn't know that it was going to keep going at that point, right? He even had a liaison with the police at that time. And so he kept putting it back until it came to a point when we were like, well, this is ridiculous. And so Morgan called his police liaison and he said, look, I'll just go to Parliament on the steps with a microphone and I'll just do my speech to the camera and then I'll go home and then the event's over, And he goes, I'll just bring one person, which would have been me, which we were already spending time together anyway. So there's no health risk in us going on our own to an empty city where everyone's at home anyway, just to do a speech for online. And his liaison said he wasn't allowed to. That was the moment I realised it was nothing to do with health because there was no risk. They didn't want people speaking up against the government, full stop. It didn't matter what it was.
Right.
That's when I was like, I need to do something. And I came up with this idea of a live stream protest because most of the people that were protesting against the lockdowns and things like that are actually not criminals and we're actually law-abiding citizens.
Sure.
And in August 2020, we were so confused because it definitely wasn't about health. That was obvious. The brothels were open, but the churches were closed. You can't make that make sense.
You can't make that up either.
Anzac Day parade was cancelled.
Yeah.
And the same day, the football stadium was filled with tens of thousands of people for a football game. And so law-abiding citizens were trying to make sense of it, but it didn't make sense.
Everyone around the country is being encouraged to do something similar. Come out and stand by their wreath or at the end of their driveway for a minute's silence. It's another way neighbourhoods are coming together during this challenging time.
And everything that we wanted to do to push back against it was unlawful, but we aren't unlawful people. So it was a very confusing time for people like me. And so I came up with this idea of a live stream protest, which meant that people could stay home but still feel like they were connected to other like-minded people and find out that they're not alone. I promised the audience that I would collate all of their comments into some sort of pie graph or diagram and I'd send it to all the members of parliament. So I gave them a format, put what electorate you're in and say what you're actually thinking about the lockdowns, and I'll collate it into this diagram or something. And there was 4,500 comments. No one knew who I was. No one knew what RDA was. I didn't know what RDA was. I had one idea, Sean, and that's how it happened. And I didn't even know how to make a pie graph, by the way. So someone came out of the woodworks within like 3 days. I had this beautiful document, and I sent it to all the members of parliament, which, by the way, they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for data that rich.
Yeah.
And I just sent it to their inbox and, I thought they would appreciate it. I thought I would get an award or something, doing all this work for nothing, but they hated me. They never listened to me and they never had, and they hate me now more than ever.
Yeah.
So I think back then people like me thought that we had a bigger voice than we did. We thought that members of parliament cared what people thought and we thought data like that would make an impact, but it didn't seem
We'll
to.
put that data on the screen if you've got it.
I would, yes, of
We'll
course.
stick it up so people can see what you're talking about there. And so from that, this is now what time is this?
This is August 2020.
Right. So you're only a few months into COVID being
Yeah.
on the shores and lockdowns are sort of starting and things like that. And everyone's got obviously in Victoria, it was the worst hit. Did you then decide that that was going to lead into more and more from there, or was there no real decision? It just sort of flowed.
There was no decisions ever. It just happened. 3 weeks later, but by the way, when I say it just happened, I told you that I prayed for purpose. So obviously this was my purpose. And the 3 years leading up to this was training for this, but I didn't know what I was training for until I knew. Anyway, 3 weeks after the live stream protest, okay, so I've got a few Facebook followers now. And of course, my dad was there the whole time. We were living together.
Yep.
So they were supporting me throughout the whole thing. And then I remember that big bus, the Sack Dan Andrews bus.
Yep.
So it had a grotesque picture of Daniel Andrews putting his fingers in his ears because he wasn't listening to people.
Right.
And it said Sack Dan Andrews on the bus. And I don't know if you know much about narcissists, but they really hate being mocked. And I think that was the day that Daniel Andrews knew exactly who I was and was coming after me, which we would find about later. Anyway, this bus was driving around for 4 or 5 days and it gained a lot of attention and traction and the police were harassing us every day. They would set up roadblocks. They would drug and alcohol test the driver. They would ask me for my details 4 times a day, even though they knew who I was. But what it did is give me great content. People started watching me because of that, because I look pretty innocent and the police are harassing me and it kind of makes good content.
Yeah. And so what was the actual, for those who haven't followed your story, so what was that bus? What was Reignite Democracy Australia? What was all this sort of, what was the, was it a freedom, like the freedom movement? What were you actually trying to encapsulate at that point?
I was trying to give people a united voice because I didn't want to feel alone. So I guess no one else wanted to feel alone. And we felt like maybe we were crazy and we were getting gaslit all the time out there. And RDA, with all the views and followers that it got straight away, it was the timing that was everything. But because it got so much traction straight away, people knew instantly, oh, I'm not crazy. That's really what I wanted to take the aggression that people had stuck in their bodies and get it out into something useful.
Right.
Because it's not
And so
good.
RDA wasn't a political party or what?
No, we did dabble into it, but
Right.
it only lasted about a month and then I shut it down.
Right. And so what exactly, like if you were to sum up what RDA was, what was it?
It's a community
mantra,
advocacy
a movement?
group.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Right.
I had no idea.
Yeah, right.
I didn't plan anything. And people are like, oh, well, if you're going to be a journalist, you should just do this. Or if you're going to be a lobby group, you should just do that. And I'm like, why can't I do all of it? Why do I have to stay in a lane? So we just did a lot of different things.
Right.
I don't even know how to explain it. But we were born because of the draconian lockdowns in Victoria.
Yeah.
That is why we were born. And so our whole mission was to support people through that time, but also to push back against it. So we ended up being the most organised voice in Victoria against the lockdowns back then.
And so is that what found you getting arrested 3 times in one day through that, being at those protests?
Well, that was the next thing. So so there was a live stream protest, there was the bus, and then 3 weeks after the bus, I was in Treasury Gardens with 9 people and we were surrounded by 400 cops.
Are you serious right now? Look at all these cops. Look at this.
So I've got to give you a direction now to leave the area.
Okay, so I'm actually in media, and we're actually protected under federal legislation for freedom of communication, political communication. So I actually have the Constitution with me if you'd like to have a look at it. I've also printed out the entire legislation. It's actually a federal legislation
Are
which
you
supersedes.
prepared to leave the area?
No.
All right. Can I get someone to arrest this?
Whoa. Hold on a second. I have a work permit. I have a work permit. Get my work. I have a work permit. I have a work permit. I'm in media. I'm a journalist. You can't do this. They can't do this.
And I was arrested 3 times in one day. And the second time I got arrested, I got put in the back of a police van for no reason, got let out with no charge whatsoever, got arrested again.
We are not finished this conversation, sir, because I have a work permit. I have a letter from my doctor.
Someone arrest this lady.
Are you serious?
Step away, sir.
Take
Step
my
away.
phone, sir. Oh! I have a work permit! Are you serious? I've got a work permit!
Have a phone, please.
Where's my parents?
Can we have her property?
Give her my phone now.
Can I please have her property?
Give
Do you guys want to just step back from the edge just so you don't?
Yeah, no worries, sir.
They kept telling me to leave and I kept asking them why and they couldn't explain. So they just kept arresting me. And I think they probably just expected me to leave because it's intimidating. But I was like, I had my work permit. I had paid staff with me, filming me and stuff like that, like proper journalist work. And they didn't like it very much. So anyway, that also made great content. You see?
Of course.
So the live stream protest, the bus, Treasury Gardens, that was it. I woke up the next day after that and I realised I'd become the anti-lockdown poster girl for the most lockdown place in the world. It was only at this point that we realised Victoria was the worst lockdowns in the world, because by that point we didn't know it was going to keep going and keep going and keep going. It was really October 2020 that it became very clear that Victoria was different than the rest of the world. And like South Australia had a 3-day lockdown. New South Wales had issues with borders, but they had like a 2-week lockdown. No one could have anticipated, including myself, that Victoria would be like that. So all of a sudden I found myself in this position. Then I had 25,000 email subscribers in one day and it just kept building and building. And I was like, I only had one idea, the live stream protest. Now what am I supposed to do? Yeah. You remember that. Yeah. You remember that, don't you?
Everything, darling.
Like, I'm like, what am I going to do now? You know?
When you say they think it's intimidating, with the police, I think it is intimidating. So how did you, and as a dad, like where do you find that ability? I know if someone said to me, do A, or we're going to lock you in this divvy van for 45 minutes, I'd probably just comply. So where do you get that sort of courage? Because I got to tell you, a lot of people would be intimidated by that.
Look, we all have different characters. We all have different abilities, skills and weaknesses, and we all have different lifestyles and duties to our states and our family and things like that. I believe God positioned my life in exactly the right way to be the person that could do that. But without him, I wouldn't have the courage to do it. I have no children. I have no debt. I have no job I was going to lose. I was living with my parents. My mum and dad didn't charge me rent and board or any of that stuff because they supported what I did. I was just the right person for the job, you know, and I answered the calling. That's true. I could have said no to the
But
calling.
even like as someone who's not super religious, and I don't feel like I've got a relationship with God like you say you do. So in that moment, are you genuinely thinking, like, is that your mindset? Well, this is what I'm here to do. Or are you just sort of, where's your head at when you're pushing back against 400 police officers? And
I don't know.
Is it just something that came to you, or?
I don't know. I just, what you're doing is wrong. And so I'm not cowering to that. There was this moment, the third time we got arrested, it was me and Morgan in the circle. It was quite romantic, really, because there was about 9 people in there. And they said now I'd already been arrested twice by this point, so I was kind of used to it,
Yeah.
And they said over the loudspeaker, remember, put your hands on your head and walk out of the circle to be processed. And I looked at Morgan and I'm like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not putting my hands on because to me that's what's the word? Demeaning.
Yeah.
It's demeaning.
Sure.
Like you're a criminal and you're accepting that you're a criminal. So I said to them, you can arrest me. My hands are right here, but I'm not putting my hands on my head. And I didn't. And they arrested me. And they were supposed to brutally arrest me. They had the triangle of black suited up police coming straight at me, and they violently arrested Morgan in front of me. And this triangle of like crazily dressed up police coming straight at my face, and the woman behind me said, arrest this woman. So she gave them an order to arrest me in the same brutal way that they arrested Morgan. And I looked at this guy in the face and I was like, are you sure you want to do this? I am a journalist. I have a work permit. And he stopped. They actually disobeyed orders in that moment.
I guess they are letting us do it. How long until you arrest? How long until you? There's more coming. Wow. Okay. There's like 5 people. There's 5 people in this circle.
You are a group that is in breach of the Chief Health Officer's direction. If you wish to come out peacefully, put your hands on your head and walk towards the edge of the cordon, and you will be arrested from there.
Oh, arrested. Oh, here we go.
We had a group of about 10 people. We were socially distanced. We were told that we were allowed to have this. I am a journalist. Morgan.
And you will be arrested from there.
Guys, we don't want to do this. I don't want to be arrested, but we're doing this to make a point because we have every right to be here. We have every right to be here. We were even socially distancing. We were doing everything we were supposed to do. I've been arrested twice already. Where are you going? Are you staying in the circle?
Oh, we've got no choice now.
So we've been told that if we stay here, we're going to get arrested. So here we go.
Move.
Don't fight it, Morgan. Don't fight it, Morgan. It's okay. Are you going to take his hat? I'm next.
Coming around, coming around.
You can just arrest me. It's okay.
Put your hands on your head if you're willing to leave peacefully, and we'll get an arrest.
No, but you can arrest me.
No, put your hands on your
I'm
head.
not putting my hands on my
Okay,
head.
we'll get an arrest.
I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist, guys. I have work permits. I have an exemption for my mask. I was told that I was allowed to be here. So I'm not putting my hands on my head because, yeah. I'm a journalist. I'm protected under federal legislation of implied freedom of political communication. I'm a journalist. I have a work permit. I have an exemption for my mask. Are you sure you want to arrest me?
So
well done.
It was pretty shocking. But you can see it in my face.
Sure.
I was scared.
Yeah.
I was scared. I'm not a robot. Of course I get scared.
Yeah, well, it sounds scary, and it doesn't sound very romantic, if I'm honest.
I'm a weird person.
More scary than romantic for me.
That's why I'm supposed to be doing this, because I find humor in some of these things.
Yeah, well, you've got to add levity to that. It's a crazy Orwellian situation. Yeah.
Dad wishes that he didn't move on. He got told to move on, and he did, which I think I told you to, because I'm like, Dad, this isn't your fight. It's okay. But what do you wish?
We should have stayed.
What do you? Sorry, you're the interviewer.
We should have stayed. We should have stayed with you. But in hindsight, that's too late for that now.
Yeah, but it is scary, hey, as a dad, seeing this sort of stuff. I mean, even if it's not your daughter, but just what was going on in Melbourne at that time, even if it was just a stranger that you saw treated like this. I mean,
this is a very, very good question. And at the time, for some reason, we had no fear at all. There was absolutely no fear at all. We just felt that Monica was doing the things she needed to do because she had the calling, and she just stepped up and did what the calling was. And we, at the time, we just felt that we were doing the right thing. We just let things happen. And I'm so glad that it has happened. What has happened? You might have to edit some of this.
No, we edit away. That's fine. It all gets chopped up nicely. Okay. So then moving along from that, was there any outcome from that, from those 3 arrests? Was there any further action, or only the action that you're now taking against Vic Police?
Oh, well, they gave me 2 COVID fines on that day, one for not wearing a mask and one for being in a group larger than 10.
Right.
And they both got withdrawn.
Right, awesome.
So I don't know what crime I was committing at all, and neither do they at this point. But anyway, so I'm suing them for that.
Right.
It's taken 3.5 years. It's been a messy process. I've learnt a lot, but it's coming up July 23rd because especially what I've realised the most important thing to argue in this court case is the fact that independent journalists should have the same rights as mainstream media journalists because we need people like that going out on the streets and doing things. And if they treat us differently than the mainstream media journalists, well, that's not a very democratic situation, is it?
Sure.
So that's kind of my main point.
Right. And that's, you got to go down to Melbourne for that on the 23rd, is that right?
Yeah, it's actually booked in for 15 days in the county court. So it's a pretty big deal.
Interesting, yeah.
And there'll be police on the stand and it'll be quite a thing, a spectacle, I think.
And what can people do to support that or get behind that or get involved or listen or watch?
Well, they can pray for me on July 23rd, or a lot of people are coming, especially to the first day. So some people are even coming from interstate, just flying in for the first day. I think the first day is the most important, July 23rd.
And it's open to the public, right? So
it's
anyone
open to the
can
public.
go?
Not everyone will be able to fit in.
Sure.
But even if there's hundreds of people outside the courtroom that day, it shows the judge, the mainstream media, and the other side that even if it's just me in the courtroom, there's all these people interested, watching.
Yeah.
And there'll be mainstream media, of course, and all that sort of stuff. And I've actually met some great mainstream media journalists who cover things like this. So I hope that we can just air some of this stuff, and all the documents will be public knowledge by the end of it. They'll all be public record. And we might need to rely on that in the future. There might be climate change lockdowns. There might be, there's diseases coming out every day that are going to kill us apparently. So who knows when the next lockdown is, and I don't want people to be scared to leave their house.
Or to speak up about it and fight back, I guess, yeah. So then from there, obviously on it went in Victoria. There was just more and more madness and more restrictions, lockdowns, rules. I mean, just reliving that, it was a crazy time. You watch some of the old footage of the things coming out of people's mouths. What led to this book here, Cell 22, which I just hold up to the camera? And it's funny because 22 is my family's number. And I just thought it was really interesting that there was not just Cell 22, but you're in there for 22 days. And
I got out on the 22nd of September and it was courtroom number 22.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I didn't know all that, but I thought that was very funny, yeah.
And when they call you on the intercom when you're in prison, they call you by your cell number, not your name.
Right, okay.
I think it's a dehumanising thing.
Of course,
it's like Cell 22, it's like Monica is literally the same amount of syllables. But anyway... So, I actually started writing that book when I got arrested 3 times in one day at Treasury Gardens because someone suggested that I write a book. And I thought the second time I got arrested in Treasury Gardens, I was put in the back of a divvy van and I was handcuffed and I was crying.
Yeah.
See, I'm not a robot. I was crying because I was shocked and I couldn't even wipe my own tears because my hands were behind my back.
Wow.
So that was the first chapter of the book. And then when I got put in solitary confinement, I woke up and I realised that the first chapter had definitely changed.
Sure.
And the book had gotten way more interesting. And I was so busy on the outside doing work because it was so full on. I didn't have the time to finish writing the book. But then when they put me in solitary confinement, I had 22 days of uninterrupted time to focus on finishing the book. So I hand wrote 202 pages, I know, in Cell 22. And it's because of prison.
202 as well.
Yeah, I know. It's because of prison that I was able to finish writing that book.
Yeah.
And because of prison, I had a better story. And because of prison, I'm probably here talking to you today because, to be honest, prison gave me a story better than the average activist.
Sure.
And so I was able to network with people all over the world. I was able to do a tour and do 92 events across Australia. And so really, I'm very grateful for going to prison.
It's such a positive way to, such a silver lining to a
Massive.
very dark cloud, hey?
Massive.
So tell us what actually caused the, this situation. Why did you get locked up?
Yeah. So I got charged with I promoted a poster, an anti-lockdown protest poster. I used to post them all the time, and I would say, I am going to report on this protest. And that was my loophole around promoting protest without actually getting charged with incitement.
Yeah.
But I just got bored of that and I stopped playing the game, and I promoted a protest and I said, I am going to this protest and so should you.
And you promoted it on Facebook or something,
Telegram, everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what I got arrested for, a social media post. So I got charged with incitement, which is if I incited you to do an armed robbery, I would be culpable of armed robbery too because I coerced you to do it for me, right? Which makes sense. But in this case, I was charged with inciting people to break COVID restrictions, which is only a finable offence. Now, the charge of incitement should only be relative to the punishment should be relative to the crime that you're inciting people to do, I think. And so if you put it into perspective, it's like me and you go for a drive and you park in a no parking zone and you get a parking ticket and I get a criminal charge. That's how absurd it is.
For encouraging me to park there, yeah.
But what we know now is that it was never about the incitement charges at all because none of the incitement charges that they gave to other people went to court. They all got dropped, every single one of them. It was all about the bail conditions. So for those who don't know, I went to prison because I refused to sign bail conditions. I didn't go to prison as a convicted criminal. I don't have a conviction at all.
So that incitement charge against you eventually got dropped, right?
6 months later.
But your time in jail was because when you were brought in, they wanted you to explain the bail conditions as well. Just let's make it sure that everyone understands exactly what we're going on here.
And the reason I stayed in prison for 22 days was just waiting for the appeal of the bail conditions. And that's when I got out. Anyway, so the bail conditions, people obviously say, oh, well, you had a choice then. You could have just signed bail conditions. And obviously I had a choice. But let me explain the bail conditions to you and then you can tell me what kind of choice I had. There was obviously one in there that said Monica cannot incite people to break COVID restrictions, which I was finding loopholes around for the last year anyway. So that's fine. I can sign that. I can just change the wordings like I was doing for the whole year. But it was these two that were the problem. The first one was Monica cannot speak in opposition to the COVID restrictions. Full stop. No caveat around that.
Yeah.
So not in my dreams, not in my sleep, not in the car, not at home
Not
with
at
my
the dinner
parents.
table. Yeah.
Now think about this. Every single person in Victoria, especially every single mainstream media journalist, every single politician, all they were talking about was COVID. That was everything back then. So literally they were saying Monica Smit has to shut her mouth and Monica Smit cannot speak in opposition to the government. That's what it said. But even worse than that, now I would have lasted 5 seconds on the outside. I would have breached my bail and been in prison anyway for breaching bail. Because if you breach bail, you go to prison for 3 months.
Right.
Okay? So I knew I was safer in prison than outside with that bail condition. The second one was worse. I had to delete everything off the RDA website that was in opposition to the COVID restrictions, which was the entire website because that's what it was for. And I had 8 staff. They would have all lost their jobs and they would have been mandated in another job soon, right? And whatever the website was doing, it's kind of a blur to me now, but people were watching. And there was about 50,000 views a day sometimes, depending on the petitions or campaigns that we were doing. So the government wanted to shut that website down at the most critical moment in Victoria's pushback. When I was arrested and given those bail conditions, it was 3 weeks before the construction protest where they shut down the Westgate Bridge. It was 3 weeks before the Shrine protest where people were shot in the back with rubber bullets, remember?
I do.
A battle of beliefs ending with open fire.
They're throwing stuff now and, okay, they're shooting. They're now shooting.
The pilgrimage to consecrated land pitting protesters against police. The tense standoff erupting, spreading mayhem through the streets.
This was the most intense time for Victoria's pushback and they wanted to shut my mouth at that critical moment and take the website away. The the website had become a resource for people and a service to people.
Sure.
So if I had signed those bail conditions, yeah, I would have been at home drinking my, coffee and having all my luxuries, but I never would have forgiven myself. It would have been terrible. And I would have felt like such a coward that I wouldn't be here today. I would have just slithered back into private life because I'd be ashamed of myself because I knew I could do that. Now, one more thing before I move on is that 3 days before I got arrested, given bad bail conditions, didn't sign them and went to prison, I had a dream that I got arrested, given bad bail conditions, didn't sign them and went to prison, and I was fine in my dream. Not only was I fine, I woke up and I felt very satisfied with what I had done. So when I got arrested 3 days later, I was like, oh, okay, I know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
People think that it was this hard decision that it wasn't a hard decision. I already knew what I was going to do and I knew where I was going to end up.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a choice at all. I felt like a puppet on strings. I was just like, yeah, okay, cool. This is what we're doing. And I knew that I'd be fine.
Yeah. Can you understand that people will be skeptical of that? Like people without faith, for example, even myself, like to me it sounds, I don't consider myself without faith, but I consider myself, I've never had any real, religious experiences. But to say that you saw, like you had almost a premonition, has that ever happened to you before? Have you been met with skepticism on that or?
No, people are, people like to hear that because it was so vivid that I told my boyfriend, Morgan, at the time, I told him the next day.
Yeah, wow.
I said, if I get arrested and given bad bail conditions, I just want you to know that I'm not going to sign them. And he said, so you'll go to prison? And I was like, would they really do that to me? I don't know. I guess so. So he was prepared as well. I've never had a dream that's been that impactful in my life. This isn't something that happens to me often.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it meant anything until I got arrested.
Until it did, yeah.
And when it happened, I was like, oh, thanks for that, because I wasn't shocked. And and look, even non-religious people have dreams.
Sure.
That come true. Non-religious people have feelings I can explain everything I've just said to you and take God out of it.
Yeah.
Because you get feelings in your gut, you get intuition. You see things and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to go down there, or I should turn left. I should take the long way home today. Why should I take the long way home today? But sometimes these things come up. So whether it's God or intuition or the universe or whatever it is, if you open yourself up to feeling these things, you feel them, and I feel them.
And I think, look, what you say just speaks to such a high integrity that you're in that position, and there's a million reasons why you should have signed those bail conditions and just gone home.
What's
and I think
one of them?
It's just
what was one
well,
reason
I mean,
why?
Just the average person out there would be just like saying if we put 100 people here, let me reframe it. If we put 100 people in your position that you're in, 99, I reckon, would have said, you know what, I've got a valid reason to take the easy road here, and just, no one would have thought less of you is what I'm saying, like no one would have held it against you that you were cornered like that and you chose to go to prison. I think it's commendable. That's all.
Well, look, let me put it this way. I know people would have forgiven me for signing those bail conditions. Absolutely. But I wouldn't have been able to forgive myself. And to be honest, I don't really care what you think about me. I care what I think about me. I care what my dad and my mum think about me. I care what God thinks about me, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it. If you read my book, I've lived a life with no integrity before. And I know the pain that creates. It is more painful to live out of integrity than it is to go through pain while in integrity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I knew that. I'd already had those experiences, and maybe that's why I was a party girl before I did this. So I knew what it felt like to disrespect myself. And people say, oh, you've got to don't worry about everyone else. Just do what's right for you, right? That was right for me. Sure. Because when I was in prison, I was at complete peace.
That's amazing.
To be honest, it was actually really relaxing because I was working really hard and I had nothing else to do in there but be positive. I did lots of floor exercises. I fasted for 12 days. I wrote my book. It was very productive. And my parents kept me positive because they didn't tell me any of the negative stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
They had a harder time outside of prison than I did, I think. So,
well, let's get your side of it, John, because there's a video on the Reignite Democracy website where you're in the car with, which we haven't mentioned, your wife, Lise. Is it Lise or Lise? Lise. Yeah, Lise. Obviously real strong couple, and a testament to your great parenting that you've raised an amazing daughter.
this is not going to stop today. Thank goodness Monica, with her God beliefs, is very strong. She made the decision to not sign that bail order, which would have stopped all other political parties like ourselves or movements like ourselves to be wiped off the Australian landscape. Somebody had to make the choice. And it happened to be Monica. Anyway, we decided to drive to the prison now where Monica is interned, which is in, I'm not supposed to say. And we again tried to see her and all that sort of stuff, but it's impossible. Maybe this is what we need to do. We need to wake up Australia that we've lost our freedoms. My parents left Europe to go to a country that was free, as far away from Europe as possible. They came to Australia.
So we're behind Monica all the way. And I know that all of you are, I can tell, and this is what is going to sustain her. So when she gets those letters and those cards, and don't put anything in them, just the writing, I know that that will help to fill the void that she's going to really suffer from when she used to have contact with so many people every day. But she's strong. She's going to do this. We're going to do this.
I may sound a bit weak when I'm a bit teary, but I'm strong.
Yes, you are. We are. We have to be strong for Monica.
We've been in contact with the RDA group, the people that are working for Monica full-time, or working for RDA, and they are so pumped. I mean, they're so,
committed. And it's lit the fire in their belly. And if that's more what this does, that's exactly what they don't want. They want to divide us and conquer. And we're going to show them that they can't do that. So just keep up everything we can and keep positive and just look forward to the opportunity to let justice take the stand. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
I look at that video and it's that emotion of anger, the sadness, the struggle. I mean, my voice breaks almost just talking about it, because I can just imagine not being able to access and communicate with your daughter, knowing that she's on the right side of history, and knowing that what she's done, it doesn't equate to or amount to being locked up, let alone in solitary confinement. What was going through your mind at that point? What was that like for you?
Just to give you a little bit of history of the time that we found out that Monica was arrested, we were travelling around Australia, on the outside of Australia. We were promoting, because Monica had started over 100 RDA groups around Australia. So they were all over Australia. So we were given all the information about the leaders of each group, and we were driving around Australia, starting from Victoria, going along the coast, all the way to Darwin, down to Broome, and we were visiting with all these groups, and we were able to give them merchandise and encourage them to keep going and all that sort of stuff. So we were well and truly in touch with what Monica was doing at the time, because it took us about 5 months to travel around Australia. So we got a call when we got to South Australia. We were there for a couple of days talking to a couple of groups, and we got a call from Monica on a Sunday around, I think it was around 7 o'clock in the evening. And Monica said, "Dad, get out of South Australia. They're going to close the border tonight." So we got straight in the van and we drove across the border. Got across the border just in time, even though there was lots of signs there that we couldn't cross and all that stuff. So we got across the border and we found this fantastic place to relax for a couple of days. We found this park. There was nobody around. There was a little river. I went for a walk and all that sort of stuff. It was just a lovely spot. And we got our chairs out in the sun and we were just having a coffee and we got a call. We got the call. Monica's been arrested. Well, we were just looking at each other, wow, that's just nuts,
Sure.
So we got straight in the van. We drove straight to the police station where Monica was in Dandenong. So we drove straight to the police station. We got to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I walked straight into the police station and said, "What is going on? I want to speak to my daughter." So, "Oh, no, you can't do that. I want to speak to my daughter now." And I went through a couple of lieutenants and sergeants, whatever they're called, and all of them. They finally put me in a room with the top guy there, And I made him very clear that he was doing the wrong thing, and I actually recorded the conversation. And he said, well, I can't let you see your daughter. It's just not protocol. So that was that night. And I didn't even know, but the next day they'd put you in a paddy van and drove you to the jail, right?
Yeah,
which I didn't know.
Van. Yeah.
So as soon as we found it out, we drove straight to the jail where Monica was, to the what was it called? Anyway, there's
Dame Phyllis.
Yeah, it's a women's prison.
Corrections
and
facility,
we did the same thing there. I said, I want to see my daughter, blah, 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 and they just wouldn't let us see her daughter. So it was all a bit of a shock to us, a little bit of a shock, but we weren't surprised.
How are you dealing with that mentally? Like, how are you and Lise coping with that?
Well, to go back a little bit further, when Monica came back from South America, where she was involved in in Ecuador, there was what was it?
It was a civil war.
A civil war in Ecuador, and my wife and I were in the process of organising a documentary about Ecuador, and Monica has the facilities and the knowledge to put a documentary together. So this goes back a couple of years when we went there to Ecuador, and we wanted to make a documentary about a person in Ecuador. And so Monica came back and says, Dad, I can do it now. I've got the time. I finished my travelling. I can do it now. So she started working on it for a couple of weeks. And I'll never forget this one morning. She came down the stairs and she said, Dad, do you hear what's going on? I said, yeah, well, that's terrible what's going on. He says, Dad, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to do something about this, or do you want me to go on with the documentary? I said, Monica, whatever's in your heart, whatever you feel you need to do what's in your heart. And so she did. So she started, and that's when she started the Reignite Democracy and all that the madness that happened after that.
And so for you and Lise, though, like, were you feeling that you were almost accepting of what was happening and that this was like her path, or do you feel that you were still just panicked about it? I mean, most parents would be freaking out. Like, what was your sort of mental state on it?
No, we weren't freaking out at all. We just felt Monica was standing for truth.
Yep.
We felt that this was part of her path that she has to do in life. And we were actually more proud of her that she answered the calling than what she was doing.
Yes.
Because we knew she would be okay. We know her strength. We
Sure.
knew she would be just fine. And I mean, obviously, as parents, we don't want to see your children in jail, you know. All the stories you hear about jail. But we were given the grace to accept it and just to live with it and just to go through it. So we're kind of a family that looks at making positive outcomes on things. We look at a situation, we say, okay, how can we handle this? Do we just accept it, or do we do this? So that's exactly where we're at. So while Monica was in jail, we helped run RDA because she had about 8 staff at the time, and we were in correspondence with her workers. We were in correspondence with the lawyers. And of course, our whole family was involved. All my boys were involved. They were very, very knowledgeable in these things, and they helped a lot too. So it wasn't just us; it was the whole family was involved. And when we got a call from Monica, they were all there. They were all there talking to her. You know,
what a great team.
So there was a great sense of solidarity within our family. And yes, obviously we were sad. There's no doubt about it. But we didn't say, well, you know, let's just get out of jail. Just sign him and just get out of jail. There was nothing like that.
Right.
We basically said to each other, and we told Monica later, said, look, Monica's making such a difference out there. I'm getting calls from all over the world. They want to interview us, and we were interviewed by a lot of people in the States. And I think the video that you looked at went viral. It's like 3 or 4 million views or something. Not that I'm looking for views, but I'm just got the interest
the impact.
in the impact of the story. Was quite incredible.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're happy that Monica answered the call. The bottom line, that's what it is.
Yeah, and what a remarkable group. That's amazing. Yeah.
Can I just add to that though?
Sure.
Is that you know how sometimes 18, 19-year-olds think that they want to go traveling, right? And their parents are like, oh no, but what about this and what about that? My parents were just never like that. My mum and dad travelled South America when they were first together on $1 a day. This is back, 50 years ago.
Sorry, $7 a day, darling.
Okay, sorry. You just ruined the story. No. But the point is,
the hotel rooms were 50 cents or $1 each.
But the point is, this is 50 years ago when South America was even harder to get around than it is now. They got held at gunpoint. They were in planes with holes in it, with rain. They slept in all sorts of strange situations. They got into people's cars, and the truck driver would make a pass at mum, and there's like all these crazy stories, and that's how they were.
Sure.
So when they brought us up to be adventurous as well, and they've never been afraid to let us make mistakes and to risk things. We would start little businesses, and Dad would know that they would be a total flop, but he wouldn't tell us that. He would let us make mistakes to evolve. So there's a lot more to it than just, they weren't scared for Monica. It's a whole upbringing. It's the whole, and it's all my siblings. I've got four siblings, 15 nieces and nephews, 4 great nieces and nephews, and 1 on the way. We're all friends. We all talk to each other. We're all on the same page. Every single person in my family, friendship circle, and church community was all awake to the COVID narrative stuff. We had weddings in the middle of COVID, like no one cared. So I was surrounded by that the whole time. So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more, because Dad's probably being a bit humble about how he brought us up.
Part of the reason why I wanted to, obviously what we've got here with you, Monica, doesn't just happen, without some sort of, environment around it. And that's what I wanted to talk to your dad about, was just to hear and also for other people listening to maybe get some good, advice, not just from yourself, but also from someone who's raised someone to be that way and be so tough and headstrong, but also intelligent. And, it's a great achievement.
Calm down.
No, it's great.
Well, the thing is though as well is for parents out there who want that same thing, you have to understand that it comes with very big bumps, right? So from 18 to 25, I was a complete mess, taking drugs, partying, sleeping around, all sorts of stuff. And that's in my book.
Yeah.
And Dad had to watch that too.
Yeah.
Could you imagine watching your daughter just treating herself like a piece of meat, basically? Sorry, Dad, but it's true. And he wouldn't have thought that I would get through that, and the only way I got through it was I actually got drugged at a work Christmas party when I was 25, and it put me so off that I moved back home with my parents.
Right.
And that's when I started to change.
Yeah.
And so actually a really traumatic situation got me back to where I needed to be. And it took me a few years to shake off the disrespect I gave to myself during those 7 years. So the point is it's not all.
No, it's not all.
All 5 of us kids,
I'm sure,
have gone through some really bad stuff.
Of course, yeah.
So just know.
Yeah,
that.
and I think that's also, understanding the journey as well, because nothing is a straight line. It's nothing's going to just go straight to where it needs to be, and there's always going to be bumps along the way. And also having that faith and that sort of viewpoint, that positive viewpoint, that I imagine that at no point during that 18 to 25 spell that your dad stopped loving you and stopped, caring for you.
He just started praying more for me.
Yeah, exactly. And so never giving up on people,
No, you never give up on your children, do you?
There you go. So what's happening with this now with Cell 22?
My full-time job really right now is going to court and touring. So I just finished a 8-month tour with my mum and dad who travelled with me. We did 92 events across the whole of Australia. That's a lot. And we were able to meet with over 6,500 freedom lovers from around the country. So we know that we've got this, don't we? Our community is incredible.
Well, tell us about that. Obviously, you're out there on the ground, you're meeting people. What's your take on what's happening in society at the moment? Obviously, you're speaking to a certain, I guess,
demographic, like a bit of an echo chamber, I guess you could say.
Well, let's start with that. So what are you seeing that's positive out there and people that you're speaking to? And obviously it must feel amazing to go out and speak to like-minded people just over and over and over again.
Look, it's we kind of know what the community's like, but just so you know, I also meet a lot of random people and I try to start conversations with anybody I can. So in small towns, bakeries, whatnot, I'm always chatting to people, and 99% of every single person I speak to is awake. That's a very rich data set, okay? And I went to Europe and the same thing happened there, and I'm like, we are absolutely the silent majority. And I went to Bali not that long ago, and the taxi driver started talking to me about Agenda 2030. And I was like, does everyone in Bali know? And he's like, yeah. I was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, are you scared to talk about it? And he's like, no, everyone knows. What I think is happening in Australia, this is outside the freedom movement, or freedom family is what I call it, is that most people are at least aware that the mainstream media lie and that the government does not have your best interests at heart, and that pharmaceuticals and governments are corrupt and things like that, and they pat each other's backs. Most people agree with all of that. It's just that they're quiet because they're scared of being cancelled from their friendship groups, from their hobby groups, be defriended off Facebook and stuff like that. So that's why they're not speaking out. But when there's like, scales, when enough people speak out, there's going to be a massive situation where everyone who was scared to speak out starts to speak out. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I would put my life on it today that we are the silent majority. We just need a catalyst to get us there. Because look at the referendum. The referendum, it was very hard to vote no for the Voice because you were called racist.
Yeah.
But 62 or 63% of people did. That gave me encouragement that Australians are not stupid. They're just quiet unless they have an opportunity to vote on a situation where no one knows what they voted.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So there's no risk.
Yeah.
That's outside the freedom family. Inside the freedom family, the 6,500 or so that we met, what I know is that we're very regular people, regular Australians who have normal families, normal lives, normal jobs. We just care. That's the shared characteristics that the freedom family has, is that we care about people, not just ourselves. That is the only thing that I can find that everyone shares. And there are tiny little factions of crazy people within the freedom family, but you get that with any large group. You don't have to sign a waiver to be in the freedom family, right?
Sure.
So it attracts all types. But 99.999% of people are like me and my family and just regular people. But what's happening is that they're preparing. They're more self-sustainable. They're not scared of the government. They're not scared of the media. And so there's no fear in these freedom family groups anymore. And that's really encouraging.
And so what does the freedom family mean, and what does it do? Like if someone comes to one of your events, what are they going to experience?
I talk a lot. So I talk a lot about encouraging things, actually. I share my travel experiences like what I've just shared with you. And my main message I would actually say is that I don't think the globalists are doing very well. I think they're in crisis mode. They're destroying themselves. And unfortunately, we're going to have to watch it happen a little bit, because I think things need to get worse before they get better. Kind of like with COVID. All the pressure of COVID actually created these groups, created my situation or, other people's situations, which gave them courage. It made them stronger. It made them better people, and they met new friends. People's lives have become so much better since they got worse than they got better, right? The silver linings of COVID is huge. And I don't think the agenda, the globalists or whatever you want to think, whoever you think is the enemy, I don't think they expected that to happen, that we're still 3.5 years later, that I'm still able to go and have 92 events around Australia. It just goes to show how many people have united over this common goal of, standing up against tyranny, basically.
And what are you trying to, I guess, activate in them? What are you trying to get them to do? What would be something that, as far as, turning them on to do something, and what would be the action?
I'm telling them to do less.
Right, okay.
Actually, I'm telling them to, the saying, work smarter, not harder, right? We can bang our heads against the wall trying to stop drag queen story times or trying to change this, that and the other, but there's only so much that we can do. So it's really important that we recognise where our energy should be spent, where it can have the most impact. Now, if a mother is going to bring her child to a drag queen story time, I have no time for that mother, okay? And I can't save that child. She's too far gone. The only way she's going to wake up is some sort of miracle or some pain. Nothing I say is going to change her at this point in time, maybe later on, right? But there's all these people that do deserve my energy. And when I'm talking to the people, their energy, we should be focusing on them instead of the too hard cases. Does that make sense? We've got to let them go, because what I've noticed over the last 4 years is because we care so much, the freedom family, we try to save everybody and we end up saving nobody. And it's a waste of our energy. But we needed to go through that. We needed to learn that. But now we can reflect on the things that we were a part of, and we can decide where do I fit in? Where am I working smarter, not harder? So I definitely do not tell people to be lazy and stop doing things. I'm just telling them, recognize where your energy can be spent, that it has an impact, and don't try to save everybody and focus on yourself, your health, your well-being, get outside, stuff like that. Seems trivial, but it's so important because when stuff hits the fan again, whatever it might be, if we've wasted all of our energy, then we're not going to have it for when we really, really need it. And I'm kind of excited to see what they try to do again because I've met the whole Freedom family and I think that we're ready. So
and is there a call to action of some sort? Like, are you asking people to do anything in particular, or is it really just about disseminating information when you travel?
So I also create community groups on the road. So some people, they invite me, but they don't have a community group.
Right.
So new people come because of my database and my reach, and they join that community group.
Right,
so at every event, I get all their email addresses, right?
Yep.
And I hand that to the organizer, and I keep a copy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I've built those community groups as I've gone. Which I will never know the impact of. Yeah. Some people turn up and they didn't know that their neighbor was on the same page as them because people are too scared to talk to each other. They come to my group, my event, and they're like, oh my gosh, you too.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people have only recently woken up to the corruption, and my event was the first event they ever went to. And then they got to talk to people. We did business with each other. So I would ask people to put their hand up if they needed a big job done at their house, and someone else would, like if someone needs a fencing done, there'd be a fencer there, they'd create business.
Yep.
So I would say that my title right now would be I'm a community advocate.
Right.
I bring people together and then I leave.
Yeah.
That's my job.
And that's also, and that's what it is. It's all, I guess, groundswell, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's grassroots is what's actually needed. With regards to, I guess, just getting back to the getting out of jail sort of side of things, what actually came of this? So once you actually wrapped up the Cell 22 story and you got released, so is that in their minds, is that over? I guess is from the police point of view,
just quickly, I got out, those bail conditions got taken away,
Mm-hmm.
so I was able to continue speaking. Then I pled not guilty to the incitement charges, and then they pushed me a little bit more. They got a warrant out to force me to give them password access to everything in my phone.
This is after you're out of jail?
Yes, about 4 months after. Google Maps, Google Docs, Google Drive, Telegram, Signal, all my email accounts. Like serial killers don't have that sort of warrant, I'm telling you. Anyway, they also wanted my database, which I had 100,000 political dissidents from Australia on my database. Some of them had their addresses on there, their phone numbers. Don't worry, I didn't give it to them. Wait till the end of the story. Anyway, so I had 3 choices. I could give them the data, not an option. I could plead guilty to the incitement charges and then the warrant would disappear. I could appeal the warrant, which I did, and I lost $80,000 and lost. And the 4th choice was to say no and see what happens. But the thing is breaching bail. It's breaching bail to commit another indictable offence while you're on bail for an indictable offence, and it's a whole new criminal charge and everything like that. But I was still in my supportive family situation, so I said to my family, "Are you ready for this? I'm going to say no and see what happens." And 2 days later, they dropped all the charges. So it was total bluff. And
it's unbelievable, isn't it?
If you imagine that I was playing chess with the police, like a gentleman, I kind of imagine we're in a cigar room, you know? I don't even smoke cigars. They're gross. But I imagine that, and, it kind of makes me laugh that I won. I won that. And I'm going to sue them for it, obviously.
Yeah.
You can't put a girl like me in prison for 22 days for absolutely no reason. No reason. So, of course, I'm going to sue them for it. Not for myself, but so that it doesn't happen to anyone else, whether you're a BLM protester, a Palestinian, I don't care. No one should go to prison for inciting people to break finable offences. It's ridiculous. And I need to close that loophole.
And so this court case will be in the future. We haven't got anything.
I haven't even started it yet.
That's sort of plan B.
But I have to put in the statement of claim before the 3 years is up when I got arrested. So I have until the 30th of August to put that in, and it will be in, don't worry.
Well, another thing we want to cover off, and I'm sure people are going to be so interested in, is just talk us through the actual arrest, because I know that you live streamed the arrest. And so what was happening there when you actually got arrested?
I was so lucky that I thought to do that. Because actually I actually thought that I was being arrested for being out of my 25 kilometres because my number plate, So I thought it would be quite a a routine.
Were you in the
pullover.
Sack Dan van or?
No, I was just in my bus. I was just in my little VW, and I pulled over. And I guess at this point I had some distrust towards the police. So luckily I turned on my live stream.
Hello, Monica.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good, you?
We're just from the Springvale Police Station.
Sure.
At the moment, we need to have a chat to you about a matter of incitement. So I need to place you under arrest for that. Okay.
Pardon?
At the moment, you're under arrest for incitement.
Have you guys been following me?
You do not have to say I do anything, but anything you say to you may record and give evidence. Do you understand that? Do you understand that, Monica?
No comment.
Okay.
Please share this video as much as possible. Monica Smit has just been arrested for
Just turn the car
incitement.
off for me, please. And the phone, we're seizing that car off.
Well, there had been some incidents of, people getting yanked out of cars and things like that. So that you were right to be cynical and distrusting at that point.
Totally. And what I find quite hilarious is that at the end of the live stream, I addressed the camera and I said, like, Monica Smit has been arrested, spread this around. And because the police obviously then, they didn't recognize before then that I was live streaming. So one of them picked up the phone, and he probably has an iPhone too. And his knee-jerk reaction is to turn it off. And because of that, they could never get into my phone.
Right.
So if they'd kept the screen
Recording, he would have been.
if they had touched the screen every 30 seconds to make sure it didn't lock, then they wouldn't have had to get that warrant out at all. So I thought that was pretty funny.
And what was the
But yeah.
reaction to that? The video?
The live stream went pretty bonkers.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I was in prison at that point, but it gave people time to hide my computer electronics and things like that. Which wouldn't have had anything on it because they got a search warrant, of course, but my address was. I also lived with my brother and his wife and his 5 kids and my parents all in the same property. And my brother's property was my brother's house is a beautiful house that takes up the whole facade. Me and my parents lived in a house barn at the back, so you couldn't tell that it was a house. So when the police came to search, they searched my brother's house and they found none of my stuff. It was like 11 police in like full outfits, guns and everything like that. They couldn't find my bedroom, obviously, because I didn't live in there. So they asked my 4-year-old nephew, who wasn't at school yet, where's your auntie sleep, which they're not allowed to do. And in the barn, he said. But they couldn't search the barn either because it was on a separate title. So they got nothing. I don't know what they were looking for though.
It's wild.
All they would have found was freedom fighter jumpers. And they looked in the attic, under the mattresses, in the pillowcases, in the dirty nappies. Like they looked everywhere trying to find
what?
I think they think that I'm more complicated than I really am, I'm like, I don't have a map of how to take over the government, and then people like make all these assumptions that I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and like I'm literally selling books out of the back of my van with my parents. There's nothing more innocent than what we do. It's just so hilarious. Anyway.
What's your opinion on the Vic Police? Like, I mean, obviously you've got individuals within an organisation. Just break it down. What's your thoughts on the organisation, and then what's your thoughts on the individuals?
Well, I would guess that 80% of them are good and they join for the right reasons. I think there's a group of thug police, and the higher up police know who the thug police are. They ask them to do those particular jobs that no one else wants to do, And I actually, if my court cases, I have 2 towards the police, I don't actually want to mock them. I actually want them to take accountability and do some meaningful action. If they apologise to anti-lockdown protesters and if they fired the thugs that did the things that they did, then we could heal. We could heal and we could start to trust the police again, and that's what I want.
Yeah.
That's actually what I would even put on record, that I would consider not going to court for what they did to me if they had a sincere apology and took meaningful action to actually heal and mend the divide. I don't actually want people to hate the police. There are some really good ones out there, and I've had to depend on them recently myself.
Yeah.
In my van, I got attacked, and my van got attacked, and the first thing I did is I went to the police station.
Yeah.
And they let me sleep in the car park. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
So
That's
people
good.
might think that I hate the police, and I don't hate the police at all. I just hate what they did to me, and I hate that they're not taking accountability. And if I have to force that through court cases, that's the only option I have. Appealing to members of parliament doesn't work. I've tried that. And, appealing to them on a personal level doesn't work either. So courts is my last option.
Is there a certain, like with your case, there a certain target in that, in the sense, is it just Vic Police, or is it particular people within the police, or is it like specific officers that or is it just
at the moment it's just
organisation?
Victoria Police,
Right.
but during the court case you uncover
who was
doing what,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you can. So I'll keep suing them for 20 years if I have to.
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
my job
Yep.
to make a point. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Is it also like with that weaponization, if you like, of law enforcement during COVID? Do you feel that we've still got that? I mean, is that the first thing they will do again? Do you feel it's changed in any way so far?
It's hard to know. It's hard to know.
We'd have to
because
be in that
they
situation
treat,
again.
For example, I respect everyone's right to protest, but they treat the Palestinian protesters very differently than they treated us. I mean, they're defacing members of parliament's buildings, they're defacing shrines, they're cutting off the heads of, like statues, and if I would never do any of those things, but if someone from our community did that, we would still be in prison. What are they doing to protect our monuments and things like that? That to me, there seems to be a clear political bias in how they respond to protesting, whether it's political or the other option is they could just be scared of those. They've never been scared of us.
Sure.
Because they know that we're peaceful. They know that. They will try to tell you otherwise, but their intelligence has clearly stipulated that freedom protesters are peaceful people, so you can treat them like garbage because they're not going to fight back. But the Palestinian protesters, the Black Lives Matter protesters, Shane Patton has admitted that he's afraid of them. So
obviously you had your favourite Premier, Dan Andrews.
Yeah.
What, I guess, did you ever have you ever spoken to him? Or
No.
Yeah, so what would you say to Dan Andrews if you met him? I guess my question there, without sort of lowering the level of the show too much with I guess, I don't want to just get insulting about it, but
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, okay. Well, my question more around is, or I guess if I was to reframe that question, it'd be like, well, what's your opinion of Dan Andrews and his place in politics? Does he really genuinely believe all this stuff that he's doing? Is he a puppet? Is he someone that is just hell-bent on a certain
Look, there could be a few things. I think he was probably being blackmailed by China, but I have no evidence at all. I just think he's been there 42 times. They could have gotten him in a compromising position to do certain things. I don't know. But the other thing is, I think he is a control freak.
Yeah.
And hey, when you wake up on Valentine's Day morning and lock down the entire state, you would feel kind of powerful, wouldn't you? And I think he liked that. But now I think that he's not very relevant anymore, and I think he's probably a pretty unhappy man. I don't think that you could be so terrible and not be unhappy. So I actually feel kind of sorry for him. And, if I am a believer in God, I also have to believe that God loves everybody. He loves him too.
Yeah.
He wants him to come back from this, and so do I. If he did apologize for the wrongs that he did, I would consider forgiving him. Would you?
Well, God will have to forgive him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to hold hate for people because it's too much. I've got enough stuff going on.
Yeah, of course.
I don't really have time to hate people.
I guess why are we like, let's get, solve the world's problems here. Why are we in this position in the first place? Is it just a power game? Is it something that's
I think a lot of it's just money. A lot of it's more money than nefarious control and things like that. But then there's the other element of people who have all the money in the world and still keep going. And I think they probably are in touch with the devil. If I believe in God, I have to believe in the devil too.
Sure.
Right? So I do think that the devil's involved in a lot of this. And there seems to be some proof out there of some famous people being possessed or something like that, and all the symbols and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
So that they must get off on that a little bit. When you have the Arias or the Golden Globes and the entire place is wearing devil horns and the show is basically enacting hell. Like, if you're a devil worshipper, then you get off on that. Totally. But sorry, your question was, why is it happening the way it is? I think it's money and control.
Sure.
And I think they actually get aroused by it, like physically. I mean, some of these men who dress up as women, they get aroused at seeing themselves in the mirror as women. So I think our society is sexually like deviant now, right? And we're selfish people, generally speaking, especially in the Western civilizations, and people don't believe in God anymore, and they don't believe in family. They don't look after their elderly. There's so many things that's going wrong with modern society. You know, I could talk about hours on it.
Yeah.
But, you know, Tinder and the hookup culture and pornography. Oh, my gosh. I mean, pornography has changed young boys' lives forever.
Yeah.
They will never see women the same. And then they wonder why women are getting abused. Well, how about 85% of pornography is abusive towards women? So why would men then go out and be respectful to women after they watch 8.5 hours a week of women getting abused? Like I mean, I can't solve the world's problems.
Well, I think that solving them starts with like what we see here with Good Family, and in all my podcasts I've had where, you know, I've always come back to the solution being a good family. You know, like it's hard to sort of, you know, you go in a circle and you end up back. But like if we have actually people looking after each other just on the level one, and that at a grassroots level, like your campaigns that you're doing, like if you're actually making these little communities everywhere, it sort of stabilizes, and it stabilizes areas, and it's a big stabilizing. A good example is I've got a family friend who's got an elderly person in their family. Now, if the family wasn't like strong enough, he would be homeless. But because they've got a good family unit, he's actually able to return home, and there's no way that old man will find himself on the streets because there's a family network there. And if you break that family network, suddenly you've got a guy that's going to be homeless, you know? And so you get a lot of what we've got going on the streets, and a lot of what we see with youth crime at the younger end and the older end. You see a lot of these problems can be solved with a good, safe family.
Can I just say that my grandparents are Dutch, Oma and Opa, and they were in Holland during the Second World War, and they hid Jews in the attic, young doctors in the attic. So they were freedom fighters when it was far more dangerous, okay? Then they moved to Australia, and my dad was about 8 when you moved here, or 12?
11.
11. The point I was trying to get to is that my dad, out of his 5 other siblings, was the one who looked after his parents. So we had a granny flat with Oma and Opa in it my entire life. And then when my Oma was left longer than my Opa, and she lived at a retirement village on the same street that we lived on. So I've always seen my dad showered his mother, wiped her bottom, you know, and I saw that. So I'll be wiping your bottom too one day, Dad. I'm not looking forward to it, but you're right. Role modeling that is so important, because you realize how to be selfless, but also being selfless actually feels really good too.
Yeah, but it's like what you said about, you know, it's almost like the way you look at things sometimes is there's only the right way. So in a sense that there are no shortcuts, there's just the right way. And so when we look at these, like you said about the time you went off the rails in your early 18 to 25 sort of era, and you realize that that's actually not fun, and it ends up, you know, being painful. And whenever we look at these paths that deviate from this, there ends up being pain at the end of it. And I look at when we look at this, we might not want to live a certain way, but when you break it down, there's just that way seems to generate the most joy and the most happiness and the most safety and stability. And when you break all this stuff down, it doesn't translate to more happiness. It translates to more pain, you know?
The way I see it is, back in those days, I had really high highs, but really low lows. And now I'm just kind of stable, right? So it was exciting. Living a party lifestyle is kind of exciting, and that's the addiction, right? You get excited about how you're going to feel when you're on that high, but the next day you're really on a low, right? So I used to think stability was boring, and it wasn't fun, and I didn't want to be boring.
But there's only so long you can convince yourself that you're dumb too. Like when you're shirking responsibility day in, day out, and you know, if you've got any sort of intelligence whatsoever, at some point you're going to constantly be having to tell yourself that you're kind of lying to yourself.
This isn't working. This isn't working.
So what's next for Monica? What are we?
Well, court cases. I'm actually representing myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be quite hilarious, really, because on one side there will be 5 King's councils in robes and wigs and just little old Monica there on her own just trying to wing it. But no, I'm going to be as prepared as I can, of course.
Yeah.
I'm not naive. I know that I'm up against a lot and I am just going to do my best.
And
That's all I can do.
You've got the support. Like, I think at the end of the day, they might have their wigs, but you've got a lot of support behind you, you know.
And family,
and family,
God.
yeah.
I mean, my parents will obviously fly down with me and be there with me, and people will be supporting me. And people are even lending me clothes, you know, because I'm like, it's a 15-day trial. I don't have 15 nice outfits, honestly. So, you know, it's going to be a community sort of
That's
thing,
awesome.
I think. But yeah, I've got some business stuff coming up soon, and it's to do with cash.
Cool.
Using cash more. It's called Cash More.
Okay.
That's funny. That tagline really works, doesn't it? Anyway, yeah. So it just encouraging people to use
Cash more. So
that's so good. Sorry. It's the first time I've said it out loud.
Out loud, yeah. So do you want to tell us about that, or you want to save it?
Yeah, you know what? Just make sure you don't. We'll talk about when you release the podcast. So basically, people are really passionate about using cash more, and so there's a lot of businesses that are offering discounts for people to use cash more, and so some people are giving 5% discounts, some people are giving $5 off, some people are giving added value like you know a free coffee with a meal or whatever, or a large for anyway, but. There's no place for all of these discounts to be in one place. Yeah. So this app, it's an app, and you open it up and you can see all the little pins of any
where
of the
they give you
businesses that give discounts. So the great thing about this is that people who care about cash will get a discount, but also businesses will get great exposure. But businesses who maybe don't even care that much about cash, if they want to be on the app, they have to come up with a deal to use cash. So it forces them to become a part of the cash pushback, even if they don't want to. And we could also create lobby groups from this as well, because if I get 50,000 businesses in Australia who care about cash, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it actually ticks all the boxes. And if I can make some money, I can keep going to court and taking these people to account.
Which I guess before we let you go, what's the stuff coming up that I guess worries you the most at the moment? So obviously there's the cash situation with the eradication of cash and going towards digital ID
they can't
and
do
stuff.
that. They're just bluffing.
Yeah.
They're totally lying, mate. They are. This country barely has reception everywhere. Okay, we have floods. The FPOS machines go down. They're lying. The mainstream media lie. Okay, they want us to think that it's all done and dusted, it's all tied in a pretty little bow and there's nothing we can do about it. I'm sorry. They couldn't even do contact tracing properly, okay? What makes you think that they can put in all this infrastructure for a perfect, seamless, cashless society where there's no data breaches, there's no power outages, it's a total fairy tale. They can do it maybe in 20 years if they slowly get sections of society, okay? They passed the digital ID bill recently with no debate. I'm not surprised. We know that the members of parliament are against our kind of way of thinking. So I'm not surprised about that. They can't bring in a digital ID that's mandatory for a very long time. So my point on that is that I'm not afraid of those things at all because they're lying and they want us to think that there's nothing we can do. But we just need to keep living our lives, creating these strong community networks. And if we have to live in the bush and eat bugs by choice, well, I'll do that. I don't care. I'm not getting a digital ID. So I'm not worried about those things, and I think people need to look at these things and recognise that sometimes they're just lying to scare us because we're their biggest enemy now. The globalist agenda's biggest threat is the freedom movement, right? And so, of course, they're using a lot of their resources right now to target us and to fear us. And they know that the things that people are afraid of the most in our communities is cashless society and digital ID. So a lot of their resources are going to be spent trying to scare us on those topics. So I think it's all hogwash.
Okay. Well, that's a good point to end, I reckon. Monica and John, thanks for coming in. It was a really great chat. I hope you had a good time.
Yep.
And good luck with everything.
Thanks.
I'll put the details of all your
stuff,
webs and books and things. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right.
And you know, we as a family are not worried about Monica.
No.
Honestly, we're not, because Monica stands for truth, and it's simple. It's a very simple case.